When I look at the amazing women around me, we have all built such extraordinary lives, yet none of us are living the life that we thought we would growing up. Also, the gap between our lives and our mothers' lives, it's so much wider than in previous generations. So much so that it cannot be that there is an applicable social construct of what it means to be a woman today. In fact, the only logical construct is that we decide on an individual basis what it means to you to be a woman. I'm Harriet King, and this is the Business of Being a Woman, where we break down the construct of what it means to be a woman today. This podcast is really a tool to show that whatever box we've been put into, whatever label has been stuck on us, whatever set of rules comes within the box or on the label, there are so many other facets to us, and each facet is as authentic and as valid as the other. We are honored to interview women of significant professional note and impact and highlight the many other stories that have influenced and informed their definition of success. Today, I'm sitting with the incredible Lieke Lamb, CEO of the Future Expertise Center, Director of Women in Tech Netherlands, partner for Diverse Leaders in Tech, author and trend watcher for over 30 years. Lieke, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Harriet, for letting me be here. My pleasure.
It's been such a fun privilege getting to know you a little bit these last weeks and really diving into your profile. I have been continuously aghast, inspired, humbled, and just in awe of the many things that you have achieved. When I look at your life, I see so much how much the personal side of your life and professional side have impacted one another, how they work together. And I'd love to dive into and break that down with you today. I'd like to take you back, start at the beginning and look back at the childhood and your childhood. Can you tell me a little bit about how you grew up?
Yes, I had a very, very fortunate childhood. I have one sister, 2 brothers, and I had a great family. My parents are still together and still alive today. So I can say that I'm very blessed in the foundings of my life. And that's been very important, of course, in all the storms that have been there. So that's a very good base to have. And I'm very glad that I did have that. We did, as a family, have certain challenges, certain episodes that weren't that pretty, weren't that nice, which also formed me. But it gave me a solid base to work from.
A really great foundation. And when you look back at your childhood, are you able to draw either similarities or you're able to identify how your childhood has influenced you today, both personally and professionally, and how it sort of served as a foundation for both?
Well, I think that what you said in the intro is very true. That you look at your mother, you look at the life that is presented to you as a child, and you think that's going to be my life as well. That's the first thing you think as a child. And I wanted to imitate that. I wanted to have a big family myself, with a husband who's working and being my own woman, but still, dependent on my husband and having this nice family. And along the way, you realize that there are no promises being made, and history is not a repetition of itself in exactly the same form every time. So it's going to change. Your life is not going to be a duplicate of your mother's life. It's going to be very different. So that was kind of a wake-up call. But when I was younger, I really searched for imitation to see if I could have that life as well, because I thought it would be very great. But of course, I also saw some things with my mother that I said, I'm going to do that differently. I don't want to imitate that part of her life.
Yeah.
So, and that's a great lesson that I learned throughout my life. Whenever you're jealous at somebody, or you admire somebody, or you want something, my mother always used to tell me, if you really envy somebody, you should look at the whole package. And that's never the case. You never want all of that person's life. You just want certain aspects of that life. And what goes the same with my mother's life as well. I mean, I've seen her family life and I loved that, but there were also certain aspects that I did not like, and I said, I'm going to do that completely different. So I did.
And when you identified those different aspects, I think it's one thing being able to intellectually understand that there are things you want to do differently or patterns you don't want to repeat. I think it's a whole different thing, actually being able to implement those shifts and make those changes. Can you tell me a little bit about how, once you had recognized that you wanted to do something differently, how on a day-to-day basis you go about making those changes? I think one of the most difficult phases to be in as a woman is to understand you want to do something differently, to feel as though you can see a different way. But when it comes to the day-to-day, or being in a conversation or in a relationship or a situation with your child, in those moments, or perhaps when we're triggered, in those moments, how do we choose differently? And how do we make those collection of small choices and small changes that suddenly build up to those big results?
That's very hard, because you're in some way you're programmed in a certain way. You see that as an example all your youth, and it kind of gets to you as being normal. So sometimes it can be really hard to break those habits. You contemplate on them, and you try to change them. And there were some things that I really decided to do different. Also because life threw things at me. I'm blessed also with a very loving husband who understands me, etc. But also because I choose certain things. When I look at the relation, for example, between my father and my mother, I see certain things that I did not like that much, especially in the role that they had towards each other. And I said, I'm not going to accept a husband who is like that. I'm going to do that very differently. And also his behavior towards the children, I want in a different way. So that was something that was very clear for me, and I would have never accepted it any other way. So that was very conscious, but there are a lot of things that are unconscious, of course.
And you've alluded to your husband and your family, and how your family and your childhood was this great foundation. When we talk about social constructs of a woman, what I've noticed is if you're a woman who has had a career, or if you've been put in the box as a strong woman or an independent woman, there's sort of this notion now that means you somehow value less a relationship, or if you're able to be successful in your career, you can't be soft and emotional in your personal life, or that you shouldn't want to also choose for a loving, nurturing, stable relationship, as though you should almost be immune to it, or it not be something you should seek or value. I firmly disagree with that. I think we get to be all of everything as we are. I think there are aspects of ourselves that we utilize perhaps intellectually in our business lives, in our professional lives. But there is this other deep emotional self that must be attended to and must be nurtured and catered to. How has having the stable family and relationship, how has that played out in later life, and how has it impacted your professional life?
Well, first of all, I completely agree with you that being soft is not something bad, and it's. I really want to distinguish between being soft and being an idiot, letting you being played yourself, because that's very often the balance when people think if you're soft, then I can play you. No, I'm very soft, but don't play me for a fool, because then I'm not that soft anymore.
Absolutely that.
Like I said, I had a very solid childhood. I have a very solid relation. There are very big challenges in my life, but having that base, that foundation is very important for your self-confidence and for your trust in life, because sometimes you have to let go. I learned in throughout life that it's not something that's promised to you. It's not something that's drawn in a fast picture to you. I mean, it can change any moment. You have to be willing to change yourself, etc. But you have that with you, and even if it's not there anymore, you still have the values of that, and the memories of that, and the love and the strength of that. So in that sense, it's something very big that I wear with me. Again, also with problems. I mean, I had a very nice, very solid childhood, but also some difficulties. So I don't want to, make it one pink painting.
Not at all.
No, but the base, the love underneath, and even that lesson that between beneath a lot of anger, a lot of worries, a lot of hardship, there can be this foundation of love and being there for each other no matter what. That's been very important for me, yeah.
I can imagine that. I can imagine it's very stabilizing. And I feel the right kind of relationship dynamic can almost make you feel more free, and free to explore and give you. It's okay to to want a teammate. It's okay to, I mean, I was highly conditioned. I think it's so interesting you refer to your childhood, and it's not one picture. It never is.
It never is.
It's always a tapestry. And again, like your mother's adage of, if you envy someone, look at the whole picture. It's never one-dimensional.
But it's great to have that foundation. And I must say that my parents now live in Zeeland, the south of the Netherlands, at a farm. And it's such a completely different world from what I encounter here in Amsterdam with my business world. So it's my safe place. It's my escape. Whenever things get too much, I not even going there, but knowing that it's there. There's the sea, there's the beach. It's a completely different world, which is created also for me by a god or whatever you believe in. So it's kind of like a piece of heaven almost, which really balances out all the stress and all the being forced to perform here,
Yeah, I can understand that. It's a sanctuary.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's a beautiful analogy for what a family unit can be, even with its imperfections and its challenges.
Absolutely.
You referenced some challenges that you've experienced in your personal life. Would you be willing to tell us a little bit about those challenges and how they've impacted you?
Yeah, of course. Well, let me first say that when I was a child, I wanted to imitate my mother. So I wanted to have a big, happy family. And 4 children was for me the holy grail in that sense.
Beautiful.
So I married young, and I had 4 children. I have 4 children. And I was very much in the idea that I would be a home mom, just assisting my husband with his business, like my mother did. She was a working mom, but she was in the assisting kind of role.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, it turned out that our eldest daughter had some medical difficulties. She has a form of autism and a form of physical difficulties, which makes it hard for her to tie her shoes or to zip up or to brush her teeth, etc. So it's rather a handicap in that sense. And that completely rocked my world, of course, because it also took a lot of time. It took a lot of emotional stress. I remember being at the doctor's office, and they told me that she would never walk. She would never ride a bicycle. She would never be like the other 3. Yeah. So you have the emotional roller coaster. You have the time management at that point, because you have doctor appointment after doctor appointment, and you have 3 other children. And people are willing to help you with those 3 other children, but in return you should now and then help them, which you don't have time for, of course. So I refused any help, because I said, then you're going to ask me back in another
I was going to ask you, how were you asking for help and taking help?
No way, because you have to pay back double.
Yeah, ain't that
with
the
interest.
Ain't that the truth?
I'll just hire a cab or something. No, nonsense. There have been some friends along the way, but it is a very how do you say, enlightening ride to see who's really there for you and who's not.
Truly.
And not always a very fun ride in that sense. It can be disappointing, and it can be very lonely if you encounter things like that. But it can also be very uplifting. I mean, we went with her. Eventually she learned to walk. They said she could not ride a bike, and then her younger sister, of course, went to ride a bike, and she was crying because she wanted to ride a bike. Yeah. And I went with her to the Veluwe. It's a place in the Netherlands where you have white bikes. You can just take them and just, go in the woods with the bikes. And I had this little jacket for her on the back with I don't know the word in English, but you can grab her in the back.
Oh, so we actually...
I don't know the word.
Well, we don't call it that. But what we call it, which I think is worse, is reins. So like you would with a horse, you put a bridle and reins on a horse.
Yeah, it's not really that, but it's more like you have a bag.
Oh, brilliant! So you can just pick them up.
Yeah, I can really just pick her up. So I was running through the Veluwe behind the bike. And I remember her crying and saying, "Mama, what if I fall?" Yeah. And I said, "Well, if you fall, you need to remember one thing. If everybody sees you falling down, they need to see you getting up again." And I was very harsh at that moment towards her, because I knew she wanted, and then I somehow felt that she could. And indeed, she learned how to ride a bike. And I remember coming home from that holiday, and I had a letter on my doormat from the Revalidation Center, the doctors, who said that I was a very eager mom, and very stubborn, and not willing to see her difficulties, and that she would never ride a bike, and that I was not willing to accept that, and that they really wanted to talk with me because I was putting too much strength on my little girl. Next appointment, of course, we went there by bike. Yeah. You understand? But
actually into the doctor's office. Yeah.
But I mean, this is a very victorious story, but it also taught me a very great lesson, because how much strength do you want to put on her? When and when is enough? When is it enough? So the balance between accepting and fighting. I will fight. I promised her millions times. I will fight for you to be as normal as you can. I will be there along the way. We will never give up. Then I learned that accepting something is not giving up. It's not the same as giving up.
Yeah.
Accepting something is not passive. It's accepting, and from that point on, trying to find new ways.
To live
and it
around it.
can be different from the way that you envisioned and different from the way that you thought was promised to you. Because like I said, promises are not being made. So yes, she learned to ride a bike, but there were a lot of things that I thought maybe she could achieve and she did not. And that's fine. I need to let her know also that that's fine. So that was a very big lesson in my life of letting go. And the second big, I mean, there have been millions of small lessons, but the other big lesson was a big fire that we had in our house just 6-7 years ago.
Gosh, that's very traumatic.
It was very traumatic also with the children. You want to, everybody got out alive. So thank God for that. But a lot of stuff didn't. So it's a great lesson in learning to let go.
To let go.
To let go and to see the value. I remember being in our temporary home, and they were rebuilding our house, and they saved some things and other things were lost in the fire. And I had some Syrian refugees in my home, which I gave Dutch lessons to, and we were eating at the table, and then the constructor phoned me and he said, we just demolished a cupboard and there was a painting on it, but we lost it. I hope it's not that too bad. And it was the painting of my eldest daughter, where for the first time she drew her name. And it was so precious to me, because that was the proof that she could write her name. So I was in tears at that moment in our second home, temporary home. And then one of the Syrian boys, he put an arm around me and he said, everything is going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And then I realized that he lost his complete family in a bombing.
Yeah.
And I was crying for a painting over my daughter. So I learned that there's no comparisons between grief, but it's also very enlightening. I don't know the English word.
Enlightening.
Enlightening to see that there's always something more hurtful or worse
or more impactful. I think
so. You can be sad. I mean, it's not to say that I could not be sad for that painting, but it can be very enlightening to understand that your grief is not the end of the world,
and also helpful to move forward. I mean, gosh, there's so much I could say about both of those stories. I think what is so notable is a few different things. I mean, balance, you talk about that art of balance, and I think it's applicable in so many different ways. Also, trauma and what trauma looks like. I believe it is impossible for us to be alive and not experience trauma. We lose someone we love. We have financial anxieties or difficulties. Somebody gets sick, something happens, or somebody, when we're very young, calls us stupid or something, and these things sit within us. And one traumatic event has so many knock-on or consequential other traumatic events. Like you say, I think going through difficult times, it is astonishing who stays with you and who doesn't. And as you say, those lessons can be traumatic in themselves, on top of everything else you're dealing with, on top of being a mother to 4 children in those circumstances where one child is evidently going to draw your attention so much more. But
it's also a great lesson in learning that you cannot predict the future, and that there is very much scariness in not knowing what the future will bring. Because I remember so profoundly being at the doctor again and again, how will her future look like? Yes. What will she be able to? Yes. Nobody knew. And that's what I encounter now in my business life with companies who implement new technologies, because that's what I do for a living.
Absolutely.
And I talk about AI
it's a trend
and things like that. Trend spotter.
Looking ahead is in your DNA.
And people are very resistant to innovations, to change. Why? Because they don't know what to expect. People love to have a vision and know what's coming. And when there is uncertainty in your private life or in your professional life, that's what makes people scared, and that's what makes them resistant to change.
I think that's fascinating. You've called that out specifically. Looking at your profile, innovation, revolution, activism, it was, to me, as objective, somebody looking in, it looks like it's in your DNA. It's who you are and what you're made of. And because of being unable to predict the future because of that human need to want that certainty. If you are that woman who is stuck, who is in what feels like a vicious circle of knowing you want better or knowing you want something different, but not knowing how, I personally believe that, if you want change, you have to be really honest and raw with yourself about, compassionately, but about, what do you need to change to create that change? If you're that woman who is stuck, looking on, your personal experience, your professional expertise, how do you ignite that revolution in yourself? How do you take that first step, create that catalyst to that personal innovation and change to get you from where you are to where you want to and perhaps should be?
I think that's a very conscious choice you make every now and then. I believe that people are being given a lot of chances, but some people refuse to grab them and to see them even.
Why do you think that is?
Also scared of the unknown. Unable to know how to change.
Yes.
And not trusting yourself enough, because I also learned in life that you need to learn how to balance, and you need to learn how to trust, and not only others, but also yourself. Have trust in yourself, and that's a very hard process. It's not something that you do just by one day or one night. You have to love yourself and able to do that, and you have to be very persuaded that you are worthy of living, and you are somebody, and you can contribute value to the world. So that's a very long process. It's very long, but trusting yourself is very important. And sometimes deceiving yourself. I mean, we had these 4 children. My husband was a coach. He was an advisor. He wrote books. He gave a lot of keynotes. And then we spent more and more time in the hospital with our eldest child. And at a certain time, the company wasn't going that well, and the keynotes were getting less and less and less. And we felt that it was slipping away to other colleagues, or how do you say it in English?
Competitors.
We say conculega's, which is very friendly.
Friendly competitors.
Yeah,
friendly competitors. Yeah.
Sometimes friendly. And it was slipping away. And then at a certain, and I only did the back office, right? So I learned everything about our business, and I knew very, very much, but I was always in the shadows. And then at a certain point, we got a very big assignment. They asked for a speaker for about, I think it was 100 international female CEOs who needed to be empowered, who needed to be enlightened about trends, etc., and technology. And they wanted a female speaker, and it was to be in English. And because we needed that job, my husband had said, yeah, okay, my wife will do that. So I came home and like, so what? I never spoke on a stage ever before. Never. Not in English especially, but not in Dutch either. I've always been very fat in that sense, so I was very insecure about that. So I was not going to be on a stage. And especially not for women. It was awful. It was really awful. And I remember throwing up just before I had to go on stage. Yep. It was here in Amsterdam, actually, at the Amstel Hotel. And I was so nervous. And I remember my husband making the presentation, my husband driving me through Amsterdam, because I had no idea of the traffic here. I thought it was horrendous.
But sorry, just to pause there. So, you talk about what are the things that stop us. I'm not a super confident driver. The thought of having to drive in the middle of a city that I wasn't super familiar with to go to something I've never done before and I was probably terrified of and didn't want to do, that would have been enough for me to go, I've got to drive in Amsterdam. No, it's not for me. How did you push? You say
what ignites you? I had 4 children. Yeah. And I said to my eldest daughter, never give up, go for it. And if they see you fall, make sure that they see you getting up again.
Leading by example.
So leading by example. So I threw up. I went on stage. I didn't fall. I didn't stumble. I made some mistakes maybe. I had my husband driving me there, getting everything ready, being in the back of the audience, sitting like that. Well, I was telling these 100 women that you certainly don't need men. You're women. We can do it by ourselves.
We got this, ladies, all on our own. Thank you, honey.
Thank you. So, and they come up to me afterwards and saying that it was such a great story and such an inspiring story. story, and I was like, wow, is this me? And I also remember very vividly going on stage after the throwing up part and the being very nervous part, saying, I always wanted to be an actress when I was younger. Of course, I want to be in a movie. I said, okay, Lieke, this is your chance. You're a scared little girl, but you're now going to put on the role of a very celebrated keynote speaker and a performer. You're going to be there, perform that. This is your act. So I just played the role and turned out well. And I felt like an imposter, of course. I was an imposter. I was playing a role. I was faking it. But I faked it so well that they believed it. So good for me.
I think good for you and great for them.
Yeah.
And it turned out pretty well. It turned out pretty well.
It did.
Yeah, so great choice.
It became my profession in the end. So
Yeah. I think that worked out well.
I still fake it every time I go stage. But
I feel you. I understand. No. I think what is so fascinating about that, it speaks into the dynamic we were talking about earlier about that foundation, that relationship, how important it is to open yourself up to also get support and help from other people. But also it's about those conscious decisions, isn't it? It's about and having that trust in yourself. And I do think there's the fear of the unknown, which paralyzes people from making changes. And there's also the fear of failure. And you must have had to overcome an absolute mountain of a fear of failure in that specific circumstance. But in many occasions, I'm sure, throughout your career.
But it was worse for me to feel in front of my children than to feel in front of those 100 women.
So pick your heart.
Pick
your heart.
Yeah.
I love that.
So that's why I choose.
They're both hard choices.
I'd rather feel there than show them that I cannot do that. I want to show them that I can, and then I can always be very strict to them. Like, I did it, you can do it.
You can do it.
Go for it.
Really, truly leading by example all the time.
But it was a very conscious decision. Like, am I going to be the little crying girl and say, Richard, I really cannot do that. You have to help me. Or I'm going to grow up and say, well, this is what life throws at me. Life isn't a promise. I mean, we have a saying in Dutch that goes like, life is like a stage and everybody gets their part and you all play your part. And as a child, I already thought that was ridiculous because you don't get one part.
Yeah.
Every day is a new play and you can become somebody completely different. And it can be thrown at you by life, by a fire or a child who's got his challenges or her challenges. But you can also do that yourself. You can choose to be somebody different tomorrow. You don't have to be exactly that what people say you are. And you sent me some questions before this conversation, like what's your motto and what's the rule you live by. That changes every year. Changes. I'm a very liquid person. I can be somebody completely different in a few years, and that's what I love about life. There's so much to explore.
I think giving yourself permission to be that fluid. I posted on Instagram over the weekend. We are not saying that's I am who I am. It's not good enough. We are not held prisoner by our previous belief systems, our previous patterns, our previous experiences. If you're brave enough to, you get to choose. And exactly what you say, you're not bound by what you expect from yourself, even, or what you expected from your previous self, or from other people's opinions. I think a lot of women, like we say, we keep ourselves in those, or we put ourselves in the boxes that society gladly assigns to us. And of course, they all come with...
And it's safe there.
Super safe.
It's very predictable. You're in the box.
But
I also think that you're missing out on life. I mean, I spoke a lot, like I said, with the Syrian refugees. And of course, there are a lot of experiences that you rather not have in life. And there are some terrible experiences. But in how do you say, in looking back, it's also a great value to life. I mean, for me, life is like going to a amusement park, like the Efteling, or going on a roller coaster. You don't want to go there all day and not doing anything. I've had a child who's handicapped. I've lost some people to suicide. I've had a fire. I've been there, and I would have been terrible for me to become 80 years old and not knowing what real fear is or what real grief is. So I don't like the grief, of course. I don't like it. But it's like what I said with the Syrian refugees as well. At least you've lived. You know what it's like too, and you can understand other people better. You understand the world better. You can appreciate more. So it's very lame, of course, to say, oh, we use the grief for the better and it's an enrichment of your life. It's not, but it's an experience that I would not have wanted to miss.
I truly understand that. I think when you go through difficult circumstances, if you just look at the negative, you are doing yourself a disservice. you're overlooking the discomfort you've endured, and you're also overlooking that sort of, I guess, relentless optimism, which comes with the ability to allow an experience to be the experience, not what you want it to be. I'm a huge proponent of facing reality. I will often say, if you give me real, I can deal with that because you're giving me the right data. If you don't give me real, then whatever solution or whatever the next steps are, you're giving me the wrong information. So the strategy I'm going to give you or try and employ, it's going to be based on the wrong information. Real, we can work with, because real, then you're getting into the weeds and you're actually able to solve an issue.